All right. The thing on my camera says I got about 20 minutes left before I need to start my uploading. So what I'm doing is getting into the rationale for the enclave and retreat projects, which I think a lot of people need to start looking at a lot more seriously than they are. This isn't just a disaster preparedness issue, it's a long-term survival issue. What I was talking about before we ended the last segment was this guy in Massachusetts, I believe this was in 2010, got busted. They took his guns. His guns were mostly legal. As far as we know, there was nothing blatantly illegal about them, but there's a dispute over some sting ball hand grenades he had gotten, probably from somebody who was in law enforcement or a prison guard or something like that. I don't know. But, it was his wife that turned him in. We had this situation in close to that period where, uh, and this is a pretty normal guy. I mean, he's mad because he's in jail.
People on the head because traitors deserve it.
According to police reports, Gerard was doing target practice in a makeshift illegal shooting range in his attic. He also had a 6-month supply of food and prescription drugs, including antidepressants. Gerard's wife...
Anyway, we're going to get more into this later. This is kind of an interesting case. But, what do we look at? We're looking at, interesting, you talk about illegal shooting range in his home. This is related to the BATF seizure on the types of guns, which I'd recommend you do have at an indoor shooting range in your home, but we're going to go over that in a different time. When we talk about relocating and all this kind of stuff, John Wesley Rawls' audience, for the most part, is going to be middle-class people who maybe can't afford to have a spare location, a spare survival retreat location. And a lot of the survivalist type people are smack dab in the middle class, and they're worried about whether or not they're going uphill or downhill. And then there's a lot of people who, something happened and they went downhill. And in order to continue surviving, there's a lot of people who say, hey, I want to do a survive in place program. I'm going to stock up a bunch of supplies. I can't afford the real estate cost of a backwoods retreat. And I don't know how to secure the place. I can't secure the place. I'm not going to be there. So I'm just going to pile up some supplies in my basements, and that's the best I can do. And, one of the problems you run into that is the sheer tonnage of supplies and how it might interfere with your lifestyle. Or like that guy in Massachusetts, his wife snitched him off, and he had those problems. You got the hootery who thought they were associating with what they felt were safe people, and it turned out those people were turning them in to the FBI. Realize the hootery, all the evidence against them had nothing to do with what they actually published about themselves. There was no public statement saying we're going to do this, we're going to do that. They were doing a little bit of saber rattling and stuff like that. It was all somebody that knew them personally decided to speak against them to the authorities. But when you set up the enclave situation, it is not new. It's something that's done worldwide. Okay, when people are in conflict with each other, and if you really perceive that your lifestyle is under attack, it's going to be under attack. Why would you continue having people as neighbors who you can't trust? Why would you continue living someplace where you're really afraid the police are going to kick in your door because you own guns? Wouldn't you rather be someplace where if the police are kicking in one door in the end of the block, everybody else in the block is going to be coming out of their door and they're going to go after them? Okay? You want to be someplace where you aren't just concerned about whether or not you can lock your front door. You want to be able to put a guard shack up at a gate down the road and know that whoever's at that guard shack is going to be looking out for you. And they're not looking out to bust you for something or jam you up or be mean to your loved ones or tell a relative who's coming from out of state to help you out during a disaster, tell them to, hey, turn around, get the fuck out. You don't have a local address. You need your own people in charge of your own zone of control, and you can't just do this as an island in a hostile environment. It doesn't work. You have to have the enclaves. Now, I was discussing this in some internet forums, and people said, "Well, if somebody doesn't like you, they'll bomb you. They'll drop a Moab. They'll crowd up and come at you like the Branch Davidians or something." Well, I want you to realize, worldwide, there's people that are hated. Okay, they were smart enough to figure out that they got to their own little enclaves. Okay, and they can defend those. Now, some are defended better than others. Some will seek outside help, and they get it. They'll seek national sponsorship one way or another, and they get it. The Kosovo Serbs are one of those groups. Okay, they were under attack. Okay, the Kosovo Muslims were after them in every corner. The communist government wasn't really all that nice to them either. It had to do with ethnic and religious issues, and things weren't getting along. But they figured out that if they were caught outside of enclaves, we're talking about old folks. Okay, we're talking about people who are vulnerable. Okay, we have people that are vulnerable in our populations, whatever our population may be. You need to be able to provide for and protect these people where it's not impossible to do. And if you're living in the middle of a hostile city, guess what? It's not going to work. Now, a lot of those people ended up evacuating, and they ended up having to leave, and they ended up not being able to stay there. And you can look at maps of this area and see that the Serbian Orthodox population there has shrunk, but they can hold out. If they can hold some kind of territory, they can hold out. But bank accounts, or if it's just a house in the end of the hostile street, guys, it doesn't work. Okay, now they may be somewhere. You can look in the middle of these areas and see sometimes dots of the other color that are in the middle of an area that's controlled by somebody else. But these people in these red areas know that they get a pretty good idea where those dots are, where those enclaves are. And even if they're at relative peace with these people, they understand this. They have these special maps, and they know what's going on. And they're going to either be in conflict or negotiate a peace based on what enclaves they're capable of securing. Another area that's under dispute has a lot to do with the West Bank and Israel. Pretty complicated map, isn't it? I mean, that's a complex map. These are people that have had to map out the areas of control, areas of occupation, places that somebody lives in or doesn't feel safe to travel in. It is not a clear-cut map. It never is. But the individual families, regardless of what side they're on in that whole thing, and let me tell you something, there's more than two sides to it. There's a lot of sides on that. They know what it is to secure an enclave. Even if they don't live there full time, they know that the enclave is where it needs to be safer to stockpile their supplies, to consolidate political resources, to know that somebody's going to speak for them or to be elected to speak for others. The enclaves matter. Okay, that's whether it's the various Jewish and Muslim groups. There's even a few small groups of Christians in that area. Let me tell you something. That's so hotly disputed. There's people that want to throw bombs at each other all the time. It happens frequently, but they survive. They don't survive by trying to just kind of sue and vote their way to freedom in a hostile neighborhood. Okay, they figured out they need to establish someplace where when you step out the door to your house, you can look to your right, look to your left, and know these people are pretty much on your side. If you're not able to do that, especially when this shit starts hitting the fan, you're in the wrong location, my friend. You need to be able to relocate, at least temporarily. Now, for me, where I live, okay, I'm in a situation where I think in a short time thing, I'm okay with my neighbors. In a long-term thing, in a long-term political thing, would they step out and back me up if there was some great big raid or something on me? No, they wouldn't, because there's not a lot of reason for them to. Okay, we're if the aliens invaded, sure, but come on, where are we at, people? And as you do this thing, as you establish your groups, and a lot of people are trading knowledge online, that's great. But internet people have a tendency to be pretty shy people and won't make that next step of meet, greet, get together, figure out where you're going to have some common business interests, what you're going to do for a retreat. And you need to understand that any successful retreat like this is going to be made up of a combination of full-time and part-time people. Not everyone's going to be there full-time. Not everyone should expect to be there full-time. But let me tell you what doesn't work, okay? What's not going to work is for somebody to say, well, I want to know about this. I want to study it. I want to get to know a couple of people, but I'm not going to commit unless they already have their shit together and I really need it. Okay, again, getting that advice from SavvySurvivor.com, what the guy wrote was, you don't want to move there full time unless you know it's an improvement with your life. But investing ahead of time, getting to know people ahead of time, not necessarily dealt with it in that website, but it's critically important. It is critically important to get to know the right kinds of people ahead of time. Have relationships between your group and other groups, relationships between your enclave and other enclaves, pre-position supplies, and pre-position those relationships with the other people so that you can have a good, clear idea of what you're dealing with. And yeah, eventually, very quickly, actually, you'll want to get a good feel for the quality of people you're dealing with the common goals that you're going to need as far as whether or not you can get along with these people, whether or not you can trade with these people. There's a lot of guys on YouTube and the various prepper and survivor things mailing things to each other. Hey, can we verify the address that way? Can we get to know this guy? If I send him something, will he send me something back? Can we be fair with each other? The problem is you're going to have predatory people that insert themselves into that flow, but the longer that flow is going on, the easier it becomes to identify those predatory people if they do anything to anybody, okay? Now, if there's a dispute that arises, and they do arise, people can settle that out, and that's where you have your own arbitration, your own courts, your own ways of settling these things out, your own way of developing that parallel government, which eventually can demonstrate to the world that you can govern those enclaves better than they're governing the rest of the country. You can provide more economic freedom and safety and security and self-worth to the people that involve themselves with your enclave than the rest of the nation is providing for the rest of the people. Why wouldn't they want somebody who successfully runs these enclaves to step up into regional or state level politics, maybe step into national level politics? But it's a bad mistake to think that you can go straight from being disconnected individuals and then have any say whatsoever in national level politics when you got people that won't even run an enclave. There's no people element unless they're capable of it. And I'm still trying to figure out why all these guys that want to talk about the freedom movement only show up when there's a presidential election going on, because it's distant and it's large and you really don't have to answer for anything as individuals when it's going on. But when we talk about a local judicial election, which is going to have more importance in people's day-to-day lives where they're doing business and handling things, they all of a sudden don't want to talk about it. They don't want to be involved. It's not entertaining enough to be involved with. And when you set up the survival enclave retreats and the networks of people, the relationships on that, it does become important. But you got to know where you're going to be. Now, with the relocation services, this is where you can get to know people in the certain areas. Now, for some reason, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho is becoming really popular with this. There's a few businesses that it's set up there. There's a few properties up there. I don't know what they cost, but people shouldn't be overly intimidated by the cost of these places. It just means you got to have more people pitching in for it if you're poorer, okay? And I'm going to go into a lot of that later on as far as how people will pay for the real estate locations on this stuff.